How did the Tiger line start?
Well, it started when Bob Prescott came back from China, and he had wanted to start an airline, and he got some money together from the AVG guys, Dick Rossi and Duke Hedman, and a lot of several other of the fellas, and he got an X amount of dollars, somewhere in around 200,000, and then went to a person by the name of Samuel B. Mosier, who was the CEO of Signal Oil and Gas, and told him what he was trying to do. And Sam Mosier said, "Well, okay, I'll equal the amount of money." So he came up with about $500,000, and went out and started the airline. That was in 1946, and he started it with those Bud Conestogas that you see.
Do you think that the fact that they were AVG Flying Tigers, did that help them in getting financial support for their project?
Oh yeah, I do. I think it helped them a lot. National Skyways Freight was what it was named when it first got started, and but everybody started saying, "Well, a bunch of Flying Tigers has started this airline," and they decided they'd call it the Flying Tiger Line. And Prescott was a real charmer anyway, and he knew how to interact with people and get the best out of them, and it was they were all heroes. They were coming back from the war, and the war had won. We'd won the war, and so why not help them out? That was also a thing that they were going to start doing anyway, is start this, what they called the air freight system, and it was called, in the early days, it was called an experiment, and it took a while to get the permanent certificate.
I guess they didn't have much choice after getting an ultimatum from Bissell.
No, they didn't. They could have gone back in the Army and as privates, as he said, and but if you look at them, they're all individuals anyway, and so they were going to do what they wanted, and they did it.
Do you think the spirit was similar in the early days of the AVG and also in the early days of the Flying Tiger line? Was the spirit the same?
Absolutely, absolutely. When you talk to some of the guys that started with them, of the AVG guys that came to the airline, they had that spirit that they wanted to succeed, and even the pilots that were hired that were not with the AVG, that spirit rubbed off on them, and they wanted to do the same thing.
Can you give us an example? I mean, if you can tell us, the feeling. I mean, let's say people going to work. I mean, what kind of atmosphere was there?
Well, you wanted to go to work. There was absolutely, you wanted to go to work because it was fun to go to work. If you liked flying airplanes, it made it even better because you were doing something that you liked to do. There's one of the pilots, John Dobson, he retired before me, but talking to him, he had been working for a small airline freight carrier, and he got hired by Tigers, and he says today, if you talk to him, he said it was the best job I ever got when I got hired by Flying Tigers. He said probably out of 10 people that got hired by other airlines that day, if there were 10, he said, out of that 10, I got hired by the best company in the world, which was Flying Tigers.
What were the attractions? The pay?
No, the pay wasn't that good. Well, number one, you were working for a company that had a lot of history behind it, Flying Tigers. And we did a lot of flying that no one else did. You know, they would call you up and say, well, go go pick up a bunch of cattle, which is, you know, you think cattle, but it's interesting. I carried zoo animals from Kenya, Africa, and I picked up missiles and took them to Europe during the, as an example, during the Falklands War. I went into Brize Norton Air Base in England and picked up a radar site and all the British technicians and flew them down to Chile. That's the kind of thing you would do, stuff like that. So
Why didn't other airlines want to do them? I mean, were they not lucrative enough?
no, I think they were lucrative, but Tigers had a reputation of anytime, anything, anywhere, and so people would just say, well, let's get Tigers. And the scheduled carriers, they didn't deal in that kind of business. Freight was freight, you know, to them, but freight to Tigers was completely different.
What was the most unusual cargo for the airlines?
Well, I think it was all unusual. It really was. Like that, as I told you, the zoo animals. I had a rhinoceros in the front of the airplane that had a nervous colon. I had elephants on board the airplane, ostriches. I mean, in fact, the elephant, he was across. He was in the airplane set crossways to the fuselage. He was like this, and you know how elephants will sit and rock back and forth. Well, the pallet that it was on, you know, they don't fit in the locks real tight, and so he was back and forth, rocking back and forth. You could feel it in the airplane. The airplane was just going through the air sideways, back and forth, from this elephant just sitting there rocking. I don't know. There was just Tigers carried whales for SeaWorld when they first got started. SeaWorld had their facility in Cleveland, Ohio, and in wintertime they didn't have any place to put those whales, so they would carry them out to San Diego SeaWorld. Tigers would go pick them up, bring them out. No one else would do that.
How large was the staff in the early days, and how many planes did you have, and was it able to compete in the cargo business, or was it still early days for the cargo industry?
Well, in the early days, it was hard to compete. They had a hard time competing, and they were a small company, and that's where the can-do spirit came in. They would go over and above what they needed to do to carry their freight and to make a buck, to make a dollar. But as they grew, surprisingly enough, when Tigers, just before they went out of business, their total employees around the world was 6,000 employees. That's all they had, 6,000 employees, and they had a fleet of about 25 747s and 15 727s and 10 DC-8s. So they didn't have a lot of airplanes.
Mrs. Chenault actually served on
On the board.
On the board. But what about Claire Lee Chenault? I mean, he was still around after the line was. What was his take on this whole airline
When
business?
Flying Tigers started? Well, Chenault was over at CAT, and he was running CAT, and so he wasn't really running the airline at Flying Tigers, and it was a a relationship of, well, to Prescott, well, good on you. We hope you make a go of it. And as far as any real connection, there was none.
But was he, like you said, he said, "Oh, good on you." So he was quite proud that
Yeah,
something like this had
he was.
transpired.
Yeah,